Hello, friends. It is the end of the month. Today is November 30th. You will see this in about a week, but it is time to look at all the books that I read in November. I read 15 books in the month of November, which is probably the most books I have read in a month in some time. It was a really productive month for me, getting all those books that I've been currently reading for a while done, and also finishing off some vlog projects heading into the end of the year. Also, I think one of the reasons I read so many books was because I had some really great reads this month. Most of my reads were 4 stars, and my lowest reads were 3 stars. Like, it was very good quality books this month overall. I also spent the month finishing off some series, so I knew those were going to be wins most likely because I've already read books in the worlds or in the series that I knew that I liked. So let's dive in. We're going to start with my lowest rated and work our way to my highest rated. And might I add, the highest rated book in this vlog might surprise you. It's my only 5-star, and I think it's going to surprise a lot of people that I gave this book 5 stars. So let's dive in. I ended up having 2 3-star reads this month. The first one of those was Painted All Red by S.T. Abbey. This is the final book in the Mind F series. And unfortunately, this just was kind of meh for me overall, very middle. And I just didn't really care about what was going on, which is unfortunate because I really did like the first books in this series. And if you kind of look at my ratings throughout the novellas, they just kept going down and down and down. So the first books in the series were where I was most invested. I originally thought my ratings were going down because I binged the first 4 books and I thought I was getting fatigued. But now looking back after reading the 5th book with a little bit of space, I think I'm just not as interested in the story as it went on. For those that haven't heard of this story, it follows a female serial killer who had horrible things happen to her, and she is seeking revenge. Our love interest is a FBI agent who is actually tasked in finding her. He works for the behavioral analysis unit, so it really does give you a Criminal Minds vibe, which was what I really loved about this book going in. Unfortunately, over time, it just kind of petered off. They do start a romance and he doesn't know who she is. And after a while, it just kind of lost my interest. My second 3-star read was The Stars Are Dying. This book, I actually had quite the journey with. I really liked the first 100 to 130 pages of this book. It's a journey book at the beginning, and I really do like a journey book to get to know characters and to get to know what's going on inside the world. I felt like it really gives you time to know these characters and care about them. However, once I got to the actual trials in this book and the love interest in this book started to lose me a little bit, and it just kind of kept losing me over time. Had I not loved the first part, this may have even scored a tiny bit lower, but because I did put that into consideration with my rating, it came out as a 3-star. In this book, we follow Estrella, and Estrella does not remember her past. She only knows the last 5 years of her life, and she has been in kind of a horrible situation under this man's control. She does sneak out every once in a while and gets to know the princess of the land that she lives in, and they do become friends. This princess is about to go into something called the Libertatum, and the Libertatum is basically a set of trials that each land sends one person to protect themselves from vampires. The winning person gets their land protected from the vampires. The vampires cannot hunt in their land. She decides to go with her friend to the Libertatum as emotional support, and along the way there, things happen that make her actually be the person that enters. She also has this connection with this person called Night. And Night somehow has a telepathic connection with her and can appear in her mind throughout the journey of this book. Eventually, we do figure out how that works, and we do figure out her past. I think the idea of this book was great, and I really did like the magic and the idea around the magic, and I liked the vampires. There was a lot of things I liked, but there was a lot of indecision in our main character, and the trials were just kind of not that interesting because they were very much work at your own pace trials, and I wanted them to have higher stakes and want them to be more competitive than they came off being. I had one 3.5-star read, and that was a read that I have been working on for months, and I finally finished it. And that was Lord of Chaos by Robert Jordan. This is the 6th book in the Wheel of Time series. I'm not going to go into Wheel of Time because I feel like most people know what this is. I have given almost every star rating to this series except like a 1 star. I've given 2 through 5 somewhere along the way. This was the first time where I basically sat down and binged the entire book. I read the first like 17 chapters over the last 2 months, and then the rest of the book I read over the course of a couple of days. Where the other books, I read like a couple of chapters every day over time. So in this book, I actually found some glaring things that maybe I didn't fully catch in the first books. One of the things that has always bothered me about Wheel of Time is how the romances are written in these books. The female characters are just falling at the feet of these guys, and I just don't love that. And the way the guys speak about the girls and about the women in this book really just doesn't sit right with me a lot of the time. And binging this book, it even heightened that a little bit for me. Also, I still will go to the end of days saying we do not need to name every single character in a book. They don't all need names. So that's how I got to my 3.5 star rating. I will be continuing with this series, but I don't know if this will ever be a full-on favorite for me. But since I'm doing a read-along for it, I do want to finish it out and see what I think of the series as a whole. Now let's dive into my plethora of 4-star reads. The first one being The Christmas Fix by Lucy Score. This is a sequel to a book following a brother and sister duo that works for like a home and garden TV show where they renovate homes, similar to like an extreme home makeover. I have not read the first book, but I definitely want to go back and do so. In this one, we follow the sister who is Kat. In the first book, we follow the brother's romance. She finds out that a horrible hurricane has come to the town Mary, and they have done a show there. They made a house for a family there, and that house has been destroyed, and so has the town. She talks her network into doing like a Christmas special, fixing up the town Mary in time for Christmas. Because since it's called Mary, they do really have a large Christmas tourism industry. The town manager, Noah, does not want his town used for a TV show. He thinks Catalina is just using them, that she doesn't really care, but she does. He doesn't really know her very well. And he is very hesitant to have this show filmed in his town. She breaks down his walls. They obviously have a romance, and we do have a Christmassy romance. I will say, considering it has the word Christmas in the title, it wasn't as Christmassy as I was expecting it to be. It does have some Christmassy vibes, but it's very light on the Christmas and more about the relationship, which I really liked, and the working through the town and the show and doing like a renovation show, which I also really liked. I've read other books that have followed like renovation shows, and I've always really enjoyed them. So it's definitely something that I'm interested in. And I definitely want to go back and read the first book in the series. As part of my goal to read as many of the Goodreads Choice nominees that I currently own and are already on my TBR, I picked up The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren. I ended up buddy reading this with Katie and had a really great time reading this romance. This one follows Anna and Liam. Anna and Liam got married in college so that they could have family housing. They both needed housing. They couldn't find regular housing. To get family housing, you needed to get married, so they did. And honestly, they really never spoke to each other while they were living in the same house. Just very roommates coexisting relationship. Anna thinks that they got divorced at the end of their college time. 5 years later, they meet back up because he needs her to go to his sister's wedding and meet the family because they all think they're still married because they are. He is from a very affluent family, and part of his inheritance is to get a large sum of money after he's been married for 5 years. So he thought Anna knew this. He didn't try to pull the wool over her eyes. She just misunderstood what was happening. He now needs her to come and pretend to be his wife at this wedding because there is a clause in the inheritance that he didn't know about when he first decided to do this with Anna. I loved Anna in this book. She is a great main character. And I also really liked Liam. His family, somewhat awful, but it did make most of the conflict external and not in their relationship. It was really the two of them against everybody else, which I really did like. Overall, I had a fun time with this romance. I found it really fun and sarcastic and witty and bantery, which is always something I like. I usually like a Christina Lauren book and ended up, again, giving this 4 stars. I finally continued with The Simple Wild by K.I. Tucker and read Wild at Heart. I gave the first book 5 stars, and I do not know why it's taken me years to pick up the sequel. I'm so glad I did as part of my bucket list-a-thon vlog. In the first book, we follow Calla. Calla has not seen her father since she was like 2 years old. She has not seen him. She's talked to him, but not even in recent years. Her mother moved to Alaska, had Calla in Alaska, and loved her father, but could not live in Alaska and ran back to Canada to live in Toronto, started a new life, and raised Calla there. Now she finds out that her father has terminal cancer, and this is her last opportunity to really get to know him, so she goes to Alaska. And while she's there, she falls in love with Jonah. In this book, we follow further into Jonah and Calla's romance as Calla decides, could she be happy in Alaska, or is she going to make the same mistakes her mother made? In this one, we had a lot of community in this book. We spent a lot of time with the people around the community that they decide to live in. And we see what brought them there, why they're in Alaska, what made them flee their regular lives, or did they grow up there? And it's really an interesting found family vibe in this book that was in the first one, but this one's a little bit different. I did really still love this book, and I cannot wait to dive in to the subsequent 2 more books in the series. I also went further through the Cosmere and read The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson. This one I liked more than the first book in Mistborn. One reason I think for that was I switched to just audiobooking this versus immersion reading. One thing I've noticed about Brandon Sanderson is he repeats himself often, which there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not something I prefer in my fantasy books. I don't love repetitive, constant explanations of the same thing, and he does it a lot. And normally with epic fantasy, I don't like to just listen to the audiobook because I feel like sometimes I get a little bit lost. So I normally immersion read my epic fantasy, and I did with the first book. But when I was immersion reading, it made those repetitive things glaringly obvious. So I decided to just listen to the audiobook for this, and I really enjoyed it so much more. Because we get the constant explanations, I never felt lost. I felt like I knew exactly what was going on, and I enjoyed following Vin and Ellen and the crew's story further through the Cosmere. And I'm actually really excited to continue into Hero of Ages. I think I'm going to stick with just doing audio for this, and I think it will make me enjoy Brandon Sanderson's writing style and also the Cosmere a lot better. Another series I finished this month is the Ashes of the Sun series with Emperor of Ruin by Django Wexler. This series is going to be one of my favorites. However, this book was not my favorite in the series. It actually was my least favorite. It came out as a 4-star, so it was still really good. Don't get me wrong, but I gave the other 2 books 5. And Ashes of the Sun is going to be one of my best books of the year. So I really loved the first books. I think it's hard to end a series though in a way that makes everybody happy with how you ended it. So that is definitely part of what happened in this book. Also in this book, we had a little bit of a villain origin story that I just didn't feel the need to find out. That's a trope that I personally have never really liked in books. So that's definitely a personal opinion to me of why this book didn't fully work for me as well as the first 2. But I was still really happy to be back with our brother and sister team, Maya and Geyer, and really dig deep into what was actually happening in this book. I feel like we did get all the answers that I wanted, but I do feel like we wrapped it up very, very quickly and rushed them at the end. There was a moment where we only had 30 pages left in the book, and I was like, how are we finishing in 30 pages? And I do feel like we really rushed the ending just a bit too much. I think this book could have been a little bit longer. I also read Only Love Can Hurt Like This by Paige Toon. And actually, speaking of The Simple Wild earlier, I actually felt like this had very similar vibes to The Simple Wild. We follow Wren, who is just broken up with her fiance. She lives in England, but her father lives in America on a peach farm. She has not really seen her father often since the divorce. She has seen him a little bit, but not often. She never really felt like she slid into his new family well. However, she needs time away from her small town where her fiance is walking around with his new girlfriend. She needs a break. she needs a minute. So she decides to go on a vacation to see her father. And we see her reconnect with her family during this story. Her stepsister, Bailey, who she really didn't know that well prior to really living with them for an extended period of time. She also meets the two brothers who are living next door, specifically Anders. Anders has a lot going on and a lot of baggage from some previous relationships, and we have to sift through what actually happened in his life to bring him to this point as well. It's a really complex story. I would not necessarily call this a contemporary romance. It's more of a contemporary story with a romance plot in it, but I did really like it, which is surprising because that's not typically a genre I like. But in this case, it really worked for me. One book that has been sitting on my currently reading shelf for quite a while was House of Bane and Blood, and I finally finished it. I finally finished House of Bane and Blood, and I actually liked it a lot. I gave it 4 stars. I'm really glad I dived back into this series, and I cannot wait to see what the second book has in store. In this book, we follow Mila and we follow Nico, and they join into a marriage of convenience that soon becomes very hot and heavy. There's a magical element to this book. There's a mafia element, which I really did like. Speaking of that, I think I really do like mafia fantasy romances. I read another one this year, which was One Cursed Rose, and I liked that one a tinge bit better, mostly because that is a fairy tale retelling. But overall, I really like this mafia fantasy romance vibe. So if anybody else knows of mafia fantasy romance that they could recommend to me, can you put it in the comments down below, please? Because I could really use some more mafia fantasy romance recommendations. I'm hoping to pick up the sequel to this sooner rather than later, but it will probably be in the new year. I also read It Happened One Christmas, which I did really like. Obviously gave it 4 stars. This feels more like a Hallmark Christmas movie though. So if you don't like that cheese level in your romances, or especially your holiday romances, you may not love this one as much as I did. This one's set in Canada, which I really liked. It's set in Quebec, and we really do see a lot of the French-Canadian traditions in this book, which was really nice to see. In this book, we follow Zoe, and she has written a movie. She works for a production company that makes Christmas movies for Netflix, and she needs to get her movie made. It's set in Chelsea, Quebec, and she needs to get the permits she needs to film there. So she goes a couple days before Christmas to get those permits. Ben, the mayor, does not want a movie made in his town, and he puts up a lot of obstacles to get her to get those permits. She, however, wins him over, and there is a little bit of a romance that happens in this book as well. I will say this and The Christmas Fix are really, really similar books in the general outline. 2 people trying to do something in a small town, and the town manager, the mayor, being like, absolutely not, and then they have a romance. But again, this one feels like a Hallmark Christmas movie, where this one feels really like a contemporary romance with a very side of Christmas. So I think it really depends on what your vibe you want going into the holiday season, of which one of these I would tell you to pick up. But overall, they're very similar, and it's really interesting that I read them both in the month of November. Another one of the Goodreads Choice nominee books that I own and wanted to read was The Games Gods Play by Abigail Owen. This is a Greek mythology fantasy romance, which instantly gets my attention because I do love Greek mythology, and that was what I loved about this book. In this one, we follow Lyra, and she is from a den of thieves, and she is one of the mortals chosen to fight for the gods in a set of trials. I forget the name of it. Hold on. The Crucible. That's what it was. The Crucible. Each god picks a mortal to fight for them in the trials to be the king of the gods. Hades picks her. Hades has not participated in the trials before, so it really puts a hitch in the other gods' giddy up when he does. And there are many a trial, each one planned by one of the different gods, and each trial is kind of based in what the god's known for, which was my favorite part of this book. I loved seeing the different trials and how they related to the god that planned them. The part about this book that I did not like was our main character, Lyra. She grew on me near the end because near the end, something happened to kind of change up her personality a little bit, but she did not want to participate in these trials. It was very, very obvious, which I guess who would, but the way she went at it was to try and like gather all the mortals together to work together versus like a fight to the death that it was supposed to be. And that gave it a YA middle grade vibe that I didn't love, which this is definitely an adult book. It's a fantasy romance. It's adult. It should have been more ruthless. The stakes should have been higher. And it just missed the mark in that way for me. But overall, I really liked this book. So I did give it a 4-star. It was almost a 3.5. But I loved the ending so much. And the cliffhanger got me so captured that I do want to pick up the sequel, that I bumped it up to a 4. Had the trials and the Greek mythology vibes not brought me in as much as they did, I think I would have lessened my rating because the main character was not my favorite. The last 4-star book that I did was January's by Olivia Blake. This is a short story collection that I read for B&K Book Club this month. Overall, most of these stories I really, really liked. Most of them would be rated about a 4-star rating. There were a couple that were duds that I didn't really care about, but overall, this short story collection is really, really solid. There is one story though that I absolutely adored. There are a couple that I absolutely adored, but like one that outshines them all, and that is Monster Love. I cannot wait to go back, listen to this on audio again, and annotate as I go. The audiobook narrator literally ate and left no crumbs with this story. We all talked about it in the Discord of how well the audiobook narrator narrated the story. And it's a beautiful story in and of itself. And it just brought so much to it. So I'm definitely going to go back and annotate that one because it really did just touch my heart. I welled up while reading it. And it really will be a story that is special to me for a long time to come. I had one 4.5-star rated book, and that was How My Neighbor Stole Christmas by Megan Quinn. This was not on my TBR. I had no plans to read this until it was everywhere on social media about this candy cane smut. Kelsey and I decided to buddy read this, and I'm so glad I decided to do this via audiobook because the audiobook is very, very special. It's a duet narration with a full cast. Highly recommend. This is obviously a retelling or a contemporary romance throwback adjacent to How the Grinch Stole Christmas, and I love a book that is reminiscent of another one. That is my vibe. And this is probably one of the best holiday Christmas stories I've ever read. So if you want a good contemporary romance holiday Christmas story with a good amount of smut, look no further. With a good amount of Christmas content, look no further. This has it all. In this book, we follow Cole and Story. They knew each other as teenagers because Story would always come to visit her great aunt, Cindy Lou Who. Every Christmas, Story and her family would come and visit, and Cole and her would like hang out. They had crushes on each other until the final Christmas where they had a little bit of a falling out. Now, Cindy has broken her hip. She needs help. Story and her sister come home for the holidays to help her, take care of her, and help her win the Christmas Kringle. This town is very Christmas focused. It does a lot of its tourism on Christmas, and they have a competition every year to be the Christmas Kringle. Story enters the competition for her aunt, and Cole cannot believe that she would do such a thing, and he must prevent her from winning. So he joins as well, and they have an enemies to lovers, fake dating as well in there a little bit. You'll have to read it to see what I mean. It's a great time. And if you need to know what all this candy cane stuff is about, I highly recommend picking it up. And even without that, like it's a good contemporary holiday romance. It's really solid. Please do it via audio though, because the audio is amazing. We have now made it to my only 5-star read and what is potentially one of my favorite books of the year, shockingly, because it is a fantasy romance. And I will say, I have read a lot of fantasy romances this month, and as you can see, I've enjoyed a lot of them. So I think I'm entering my fantasy romance era, and I'm so excited. I have wanted to be a FANRO girly. I've wanted it. And maybe I finally have done it with When the Moon Hatched by Sarah Parker. I love this book. I love everything about this book. I love the story. I love the writing style. I was calling 5 stars at the prologue. The way Sarah A. Parker explains the elements in the prologue and the gods that rule the elements in the prologue, I was deceased. I was done. I was cooked. It was 5 stars right from that point. Like it was done. Then I read the rest of the book and this love story, I have no words. I have no words for the way this man loves this woman. Like I have no words. No words. The dragons, loved the dragons. Also, I just went through all the range of emotions in this book. I was joyous and giggly. I was sad. The sarcasm in this book at times to like liven it up a little bit. It all worked for me so well. Is it a perfect book? No, it's not a perfect book. Okay. I know this. I don't really care. I know this. I don't care. There are times where creatures are mentioned in this world and it's not really explained what they are or who they are. And I would have liked more explanation around that and some of the world building, but I don't care. I don't care. This book is beautiful. I cannot believe I have to wait like a year to read the sequel. That hurts my heart because I need to continue immediately. I must continue immediately and I can't. I can't. The next book isn't out yet and that makes me sad. So thank you to everyone who got me to read this book. Rainey put it on every romantasy for me and is screaming to the heavens that I gave one of her books 5 stars. She is very excited. And also this was one of the Goodreads choice nominees that I had to read and everyone has been talking about this and making me want to read it. It's one of the reasons I owned it and I'm so glad that I picked this up and I'm so glad that I enjoyed it as much as I did. I do love a lyrical writing style, which is definitely one of the reasons this book ended up on my TBR in the first place. I had heard a lot of people talk about the writing style and it did not disappoint. And dragons and the characters in this book are characters that I'm going to be thinking about for a long time to come. That is the end of the 15 books I read in the month of November. Overall, I read 7,190 pages. Again, one of my highest reading months in a very long time. Tomorrow is December and I'm going to dive into my Christmas Advent and see if I can finish my Goodreads goal because I'm a little bit further away than I would like to be heading into December. We'll see how it goes. You'll see next month when I do my wrap up. As always, leave your favorite read from November down in the comments just so I can grow my TBR even more like it's not big enough already. Also, if you've made it to the end of the video but have nothing to say down in the comments, leave a moon emoji for when the moon hatched. It just seems perfect for this book. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.